Behind every amazing flavor is an amazing human who has perfected their craft. Welcome to Flavors Unknown, a behind-the-scenes look at new flavors and the chefs, pastry chefs, and bartenders who create them, with your host, Emmanuel.
I am your host, Emmanuel Roche. Thank you very much for listening today. Every other week, I interview chefs, pastry chefs, and bartenders to discover their secrets behind the scenes. I want to know what compelled them to become a chef or a bartender. I want to learn everything about their creative process and discover the unknown ingredients that are finding their way in their drinks and dishes. Today is episode number 8. And as usual, you can find the show notes at flavorsunknown.com. Click on the episode page. This week, I am pleased to have Chef Brett Sawyer from the Plum Cafe and Kitchen in Cleveland, Ohio, as a guest. The Plum Cafe and Kitchen is a farm-to-table restaurant that has the interesting particularity to change very often the dishes on the menu. The restaurant is open since 2016, and in 2019, Chef Brett Sawyer is going to open a new place called Good Company. The chef will talk about the deep research phase that he is going into as part of his creative process. And stay tuned to hear towards the end of the episode, Chef Brett sharing a dirty secret about his favorite fast food item. Hi, Chef, and welcome to the show. I'm really excited to have you today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Something that really intrigued me when we talked about having the session is that you spent some time in Pauillac in France, which is, for the people that don't know where it is, it's the north of Bordeaux in France. And you went there learning about dry curing ham and processing foie gras. So what happened? What made you decide to go to France?
So I was living in Akron, Ohio at the time, going to school, going to college, kind of aimlessly for something to do. I was about 26 years old and really just wasn't into school. And I was looking for something else to do, to travel. And I found a job as an au pair in Pauillac. So that's what I went there to do originally. And that's what I did while I lived there.
So nothing about cooking?
Nothing at all. No, at the time, cooking was very much just a hobby for me. I was working in restaurants as my part-time job while going to school. But at the time, I was not cooking in restaurants. So moving to Pauillac was kind of a last-ditch effort to not have to go to college.
What happened there where, in fact, you went into learning this, trade about drying and curing ham and processing foie gras?
Once I got there, it was such a culture shock. I'm from a small town in Northeast Ohio and hadn't really been outside of the country very much at that point, and very much just kind of moved there and threw myself into, learning what I could about everything that I encountered. And so it was the first time I had ever had foie gras or dry cured hams or anything of the sort. I didn't even know anything about it. So, I just did what I could and learned what I could while I was there about it, while still fulfilling my duties of taking care of two very young 2- and 4-year-old boys.
Okay. And is there anything that you have learned there that you're applying today at the restaurant?
Yeah, I mean, it's more of what I learned there is just how to explore ideas behind food and learn history behind techniques and things like that. It's something that I use often. Even down to the smallest thing, when we put a dish on the menu or when we're going through the creative process of coming up with dishes, I do a lot of research on the techniques that we're going to be using or, the type of dish. We have a very eclectic menu, so we get to kind of do what we want. And so I love to do the research behind it. And that all started very much when I was living in France.
What made you decide to go into the restaurant business, after then?
Well, I had been working in restaurants mostly on and off since I was I was 26 when I went to France. I had been working in restaurants since I was 20, mostly all in front of the house. I'd waited tables for a long time and then bartended, and then moving to France. When I came home, I went back to one of the restaurants I worked at and they were looking for a prep cook. I had been bartending there for a little bit. So I started as a prep cook there, and then it just kind of snowballed. And, but it was never, in the beginning, it was something to do that because I was tired of bartending, and then it just became, something that I loved. It was never my intention to continue to work for people for my entire life. So opening my own restaurant was always the goal, no matter what.
Okay, so tell us about Plum Cafe and Kitchen in Cleveland then.
The Plum opened, in May of 2016. So we're just babies. We're not even quite 3 years yet. And, it's a group of friends, myself and my 4 business partners, who bought a building very naively and spent a lot of time fixing that building up and building our restaurant. And now we're in a place where our surrounding area is starting to build up more in our neighborhood. We get to have fun with what we do and do kind of what we want without having to answer to anybody, which gives us a lot of creativity. We just like to have fun at the Plum. We like to we like to make sure that we use good products and for the most part, and make sure that we do things in our own way.
So how would you describe the food that you serve there?
I guess I would describe it as adventurous sometimes, but we use a lot of ingredients that people are used to, or we use a lot of techniques. So we try to make dishes that are somewhat familiar without being too familiar. We do a range of sizes of our plates. A lot of people like to use the term small plates, but we like to make everything shareable if possible. So it ranges from small plates to medium plates to, large format plates such as whole fried chickens and French bone-in short ribs and things of that sort.
But your menu is changing so often. So why have you made that decision, to have that kind of approach? And it's almost that you never have like the same item on the menu. It's the frequency of switching from one dish to another is pretty impressive. So what was your philosophy behind it?
Thank you for that. But, going in, I think a lot of the places I've worked in the past stuck very much to that kind of seasonal menu of there's 4 seasons and this is, you get this for this season and this for this. And when I moved to Chicago and I started working in restaurants there, it was the first time I'd really encountered that for the most part. And I understood it and I loved it. A lot of the places I've worked, they kind of repeat dishes in every season. Eventually those things get a little boring maybe the chefs, but for the cooks sometimes as well. When you've made the same thing 100 times and then it goes away for 6 or 7 months and it comes back and you have to start making it again. It's great for the guests that they get to eat the same thing when they want, but for us in the kitchen, it can be a little boring sometimes. So, and I also learned, after working with farmers and stuff like that, the seasons aren't so cut and dry, right? There's not really 4 growing seasons. It's very nuanced. And so I was excited when we opened the Plum to be able to cook things a little more hyper seasonal, with command over the menu like I have. And with us printing our own menus, we can kind of change it whenever we feel like it, So if we get, I can remember a couple of years ago or last summer, broccoli, the early broccoli, the beginning of the summer had a very short season. It was only I don't even think it made it 2 weeks before it got too hot for the broccoli. And we had this really great dish on and it went over very well and I liked it and everybody seemed to really like it. But it didn't even last 2 weeks on the menu because we were getting it from a farm and the farm stopped producing it and we couldn't get it from our other farms. And so it comes off until we can get it from them again. It's not that I don't love broccoli from the grocery store, it just wasn't the same. So we try to stay hyper seasonal and we try to keep it interesting for ourselves in the kitchen as well for the guests. I think the people have really kind of taken to the idea that they can come in, almost every other week and have something that they didn't have the week before.
How do you deal with potential disappointed customers then that usually want to come back and eat their favorite dish?
Well, we do have a couple staples that have stayed on for a little longer than I would have ever liked, but we do understand that you have to please customers sometimes, or can't really run a restaurant without them. So we do have a couple staples on there. Our chicken sandwich has been on for quite a while now, and it will probably never go away. And our chicken skins, but for the most part, we would get people who would come back and they don't really get upset. They mention that they would love to have had it again, but hopefully there's something, they usually find something on the menu that they like just as much. So it's not been too much of an issue.
So this idea of changing the menu very often and this very high frequency, for me, leads into like two different questions. One, it's about your creative process and how do you keep it fresh? And the second one is, how do you handle those logistics of the ingredients and so on? So let's start with the first one and let's go into and trying to understand what's your creative process.
So the creative process for us, as a Plum, there's a lot of different ways we handle it. My personal one, we all read a lot of cookbooks. We have a lot of cookbooks laying around the restaurant in downtime. Obviously restaurants sometimes have slow time. We talk about dishes a lot. We do a lot of bouncing ideas off of each other. And when I say each other, I'm talking about my co-chef, my chef de cuisine, my co-chef Vince, and all of our sous chef Chance, and all of our cooks. Ali, we're not a huge staff, but everybody's very involved in the creative process a lot. I mean, there on our current menu right now, there are dishes from at least 4 of us total on the team on the menu. We have a lot of different inputs, which is great. We have such a talented team right now that bouncing ideas off of each other is just like, it's wonderful. It comes from my personal creative process. A lot comes from things that I've already eaten, things from my past, my memories of certain foods, things that I love that sometimes I maybe don't like to admit, certain fast food items and things of that sort. I like to think about, the flavor profiles of stuff. And then I kind of, my process is to figure out similar flavor profiles in those veins. So, there's no one way that we get from A to B or A to Z on a dish.
So, but where does it start for you? Does it start at, with a specific produce or a specific flavor, a technique, a memory that you have?
Sometimes it'll be, we know that a certain piece of like a certain piece of produce is coming into season, or our farmer will say, hey, we're going to have this, soon. Or, we see it on one of our farm lists. So it can start with the ingredient, but sometimes it can start with a dish. Maybe I ate something somewhere. A good example I would say is I really enjoy going to Florida. I know not a lot of people can say that. My wife and I go probably once a year, and a couple of times in the northern part of Florida, the northern west part, in like the Tampa area, St. Petersburg. There's a lot of fish houses, and a lot of Florida has in their seafood houses have a smoked fish dip. It's very common, something I love. And so, after visiting a couple times and eating that so many times, it's something I really wanted to take on and do a version in our way. It might start with something like that, where I just eat something and, and I'm like, I get intrigued by it. And I do a little research on the dish and where it comes from and things like that. And then I try to figure out a way to make it our own. And sometimes it just starts with an ingredient and then, building the flavor profile around it and then figuring out what the vehicle for delivering that ingredient to somebody's mouth is going to be.
So let's take an example from your current menu. Can you walk us through like the inspiration process behind the dish that you are called the Bad and Bougie Chips and Dip?
So at the time that we put this on, we had a much more reserved version of this dish. So we called it chips and dip, and it was shiitake mushroom puffs or mushroom chips and a pickled ramp, like cream cheese dip. It went over very well, and it was kind of at the beginning of mushroom season here in Ohio, and we had a lot of people stopping in with chanterelles. I should say it was the beginning of chanterelle season. So we're getting all these people coming in with these beautiful local wild chanterelles, and we don't have anything specific for them yet as far as like an idea for a dish. So, but we're buying them we're taking them anyway because we know that the season may not be very long. So we're sitting on 20 or 30 pounds of these chanterelles, and we're trying to figure out what to do with them. Them being a somewhat expensive ingredient, we decided we wanted to preserve them, but not in a traditional way. So what we did is we turned them into the mushroom chip, them being so nice that we didn't want to sell them as our regular chips and dip. So we kind of slowly just spitballed this idea of what if we made this very over the top. Our menu is very inexpensive, I feel like, and it's, we very much try to make our dishes not only approachable, but affordable, affordable for people to make them seem a little more approachable. And so we decided, what if we threw all of that out the window and just made this kind of over the top dish out of something that was a very simple idea, chips and dip, and just really went really big with it. We talked to a purveyor of ours who we knew a lot about caviar. And we thought, gosh, if we could serve these with like a really nice full ounce of caviar, it comes out in the dish on a little pad of ice, and these beautiful chanterelle mushroom chips come out with it. We make a house-made creme fraiche, serve that. And then we took some black trumpet mushrooms that we had at the time and dehydrated them, mixed them into sea salt with some 24 karat gold leaf. And then it just all kind of fell together, but it really worked. And then one of our purveyors had just brought us this really, really beautiful sparkling Vermentino that just happened to be the most expensive bottle of wine we'd offered at that point on our wine list. So we thought, what if we took all of these things and put them together in one and charged what felt like to us a ridiculous price, but what we knew was actually a good deal. And so we charge $100 even for it. And you get a bottle of sparkling Vermentino. You get a full ounce of golden Osetra caviar, a large amount of these chanterelle mushroom chips tossed in black and gold salt, we call it. And then a little side of creme fraiche to kind of finish everything off. The wonderful thing about all of these things are we can have them preserved. We fry the chips to order, so we can have them preserved and they can sit, and they're not something we have to move quickly because they're going to go bad. So then and so the price tag of $100 was like, well, I mean, if we sell one every week, we'll be happy with it. And we sell them, more frequently than we ever thought we would at this point.
Yeah, I absolutely have to come back to your restaurant and taste this. It gives like a different dimension to chanterelle that really speaks to my heart. It's one of the mushrooms that have a very important story, in my life. I remember foraging those mushrooms with my dad when I was a kid, and always had a very good taste, for it. So I need, to taste that dish. Sounds outstanding.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah. No, it's. We're excited about it. I mean, it's funny. We were probably selling about, I'd say roughly one a week on average. Last week, we actually had one table come in and order two.
So I've seen as well that a part of your inspiration is coming when you are blending like different, culture. So it seems that you are not afraid to take, different cultural influences and mash up sometimes some of like recipes. So I don't know if you can give us like an example. I remember like in a dish that I read that you did some time ago, there was a barbecue laid trout that you serve with a kimchi fried rice. So, and that's interesting for me, this position of the barbecue, culture and then the Korean, kimchi together. So, yeah. So I don't know if you have some examples where you created mashup between different cultural influence.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what is fun for me. And especially at the Plum, we don't profess to serve any type of specific cuisine. Some people refer to it as New American, but I think we just kind of, at this point, refer to it as American, America being the melting pot that it is. All these cuisines, all these, styles of food are everywhere at this point, if you look for them. And, so to me, it's not strange to mash these things up. I mean, so many different cuisines use such similar ingredients, especially when it comes to spices and herbs and things of that sort. Putting these things together, it just tends to make sense for me. I feel like it very much represents what America is, which is, a melting pot of people. So why shouldn't our cuisine reflect that? So, but yeah, I mean, I think the barbecue fish I honestly think that I ate barbecued fish at an Asian restaurant I was at one point, some type of barbecued fish dish. And to me, it just was like, oh, cool. Like we could do this, as a whole fish, instead of just a piece. And again, and then, I think we already had kimchi in house that we were making, and it just kind of all made sense in my head, and it went over really well. We actually, I actually brought that back for a dinner I did recently in New York because I missed that dish quite a bit. I thought it was one of my favorites we've had on. We try to always have a whole fish on, at least for the spring and summer season when we can get them out of the lake. That's one of my favorite ones.
So now let's talk about the logistics, behind the scene when you have to handle, the complexity of the frequency of changing the menu like you do. So can you walk us through the system that you have, the process that you have in place from a creative standpoint, from the quantity of ingredients that you have to handle, as well as probably training your staff, to be able to talk about those dishes, with the customers?
Like I said earlier, I do a lot of research when I start creating a dish. I look into the ingredients. I look to see what is, if I'm doing something that's maybe considered a traditional dish in a certain cuisine, I try to study to see what the traditional ingredients would be. It gives me a good idea of where to start, and where to go from. But I relay that, we do queue time or before service, anytime we have and then anytime we have a new dish, we discuss it as a group. I go into very rigorous detail about how I came up with the dish, where it comes from originally, if it is something that is a more traditional dish from a certain type of cuisine. As I show the cooks who are going to be picking it up, how to pick it up, we talk about why we're picking it up that way, how I cooked this or braised that. I just try to keep up with the details with everybody and, make sure that everybody's aware. And I also like to make it very clear to, especially our front of the house and everybody else that works in the kitchen, that, if you can't remember something or if you have a question or I forgot to cover something, please just ask. I'd much rather what you're discussing with somebody than just kind of make something up. So we're very adamant about our staff knowing the details and knowing about each dish and where everything's coming from and where the inspiration's coming from and things like that.
So let's go behind a little bit behind the scene now. So you opened this restaurant in 2016. You are going to open a new restaurant as well, Good Company. What are the top 3 advices that you could give to someone who are looking to open a restaurant today?
All right, top 3. Number 1, make sure you have enough money to open your restaurant.
Yes, okay.
That's something we ran into with the Plum. I said earlier that we were very naive when we went into this, and it was, we were all starry-eyed and whatnot, and we just did not realize the type of money that we really needed to open a restaurant and have it be open smoothly.
So what does that mean, having enough money?
Just make sure that have a budget. Make sure that that you stick to your budget. Make sure that that you have enough money in the beginning, budget for opening costs as far as things that you may not think about, like labor and things of that sort. And there's just a lot of things that can get missed very easily in the beginning. And, especially when you're young and it's, I did it with 4 people who had never opened a restaurant either. And so we just went in somewhat blind, I feel like, and we've gotten very lucky. I'll say my second thing is know who you're opening a restaurant with. Make sure it's somebody that you can be around and be with all the time. That you can get along with, that you can fight and make up easily. There's a lot that goes into it, and having the right people in your corner and on your side is a huge deal. For sure. So, and then I would say the third thing is don't be stubborn. Your business needs to work. You go in with an idea and an ideal of exactly what you want your restaurant to be. You can stick to that, but your guests are going to tell you slowly what they want your restaurant to be. And you don't have to listen to every one of them, but you have to listen to some of them. You have to be willing to roll with the punches and to change a little bit here and there, because you can stick to your ideals and your guns all you want, but if nobody's walking through that door, your ideals aren't going to get you very far. And I mean that in the way of we went in with a certain idea of how we wanted to serve our food, with the way we wanted service to go. At some point, we realized it just wasn't working. So we addressed the situation, we figured it out, and we changed a little, and our service got better and people seemed happier. So, we went in thinking we were going to be a little bit of everything for everybody. We were going to do retail, and we were going to do coffee in the morning, and we were going to have lunch. And now we are a dinner only restaurant, that serves brunch on Saturdays, because we realized that, our area didn't need a lunch spot, and that we were wasting time trying to push a menu that wasn't working. So, you just have to be flexible. You have to be ready to make a change for the better of your business when opportunity presents itself.
What are the other chefs that do you look up to?
Oh gosh, you're going to make me sound like a fanboy, but that's okay. I have a lot of chefs from my past that I've worked with that I consider friends now. Matt Trost from Good Measure in Chicago was one of the first chefs who really showed me what it was like to be a cook and to work in restaurants. Jonathan Sawyer from Greenhouse Tavern was my chef up until I opened the Plum. But I look at people, I have a good friend in Miami, Michael Beltran, who owns a restaurant called Ariette, and he is just killing it down there. His work ethic and his food and just everything he does is top notch, and he's just a good human being, close friend of mine. But people like Jeremy Fox and Justin Severino, Chilla Thackeray in Pittsburgh. Oh gosh. I mean, pretty much everybody I meet who is doing what we do, I feel like I now know what it takes at least a little bit to run a restaurant. And so anybody who's doing it and doing it successfully, I think, but also the people that are changing the way that we think about how kitchens are run and the culture of restaurants. We very much try to adhere to, we don't yell in the kitchen. We don't put you down. We give you weekends off if you need it. We want you to have a life outside of our restaurant because we want to have a life outside of our restaurant. There's so many chefs that I could name, and I know I'm just going off the top of my head.
Can you achieve the work-life balance in having a restaurant?
I think you can. I think if you have the right team and the right mindset, I think it's very possible. It takes a lot of work. I think it takes almost as much work as just, throwing yourself into the restaurant all the time. As the chef, you set the example, right? If you can be the beacon, if you can be the leader in that way, and everybody else who works with you will follow. So I think it's very possible. I think we're doing a good job of it currently, but we're also about to open a second restaurant. So we'll see. We'll see how long that lasts.
So talk to us a little bit about this new adventure, Good Company. What will it be?
It's a new concept completely. We're going for a little more casual, a little more neighborhood hangout place. We're going to be doing burgers, fries. It's going to be bar food, but bar food done our way. And we'll have a nice, an equal amount of vegan and vegetarian options at the bar as we will your kind of average. So we'll do wings, and we'll have monthly specials of, I think, larger plates such as chicken marsala. So it's going to be a little more playful, a little more everyday, I guess, is the term that we keep using for the food.
And it will be in Cleveland as well.
It will be in Cleveland. Yes. It's about 5 minutes drive from the Plum. It's in a neighborhood called Battery Park, and it's right by the lake, right near Edgewater State Park, which is the kind of the beach on the lake. So we're very excited about it. We're going to be also producing all of our bread and pastries and things like that for both restaurants out of there. So we have this very talented pastry chef, Nolan Tidwell, that works with us now. We wanted to give him a place where he could kind of really express himself. So he's going to be doing all of our bread and buns and things like that for both restaurants in-house, and same with pastries and ice cream. And we're really going to push a lot for him moving forward. So
what is the one piece of equipment in the kitchen that you cannot live without, and other than your knives?
Oh, goodness. This is a tough one. I immediately kind of jumped to KitchenAid, but, I guess all that stuff I could do by hand. The VitaPrep is pretty essential to most kitchens. But
so no sous vide in your kitchen?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's, we love it and we do use it. We definitely enjoy a good circulator and we use it quite a bit. But I feel like the majority of things that you do in a circulator, a lot of them you can do in an oven or a pot. It just takes a little more time. But I would say, I mean, gosh, a Vitamix is essential. It's kind of hard to make a puree without a good blender.
So when it comes to new ingredients, and I'm sure there's a lot with, the variety of menu and dishes that you have. So what are some of the new ingredients and unknown flavors that you have experimented with and have made their way into your menu recently?
I know one thing that we love every year that we get, and it was new. One of our farmers brought it to us is kale shoots, what we call them. So there's kind of when the kale starts shooting up and the shoot at the top of the plant, it looks a lot like broccolini or it looks a lot like broccoli rabe, like rapini. I mean, it's very similar in look and texture, but it's much, much sweeter and much less bitter. That's something that we've been using for a couple of years that we love, that we don't see a lot of people use. But also baby corn. I'd say baby corn is the one thing that makes it to our menu every year in one way, shape, or form. It's whether, it's always a different technique of cooking it, but it's probably one of my favorite things that we get from our farmers every year. It's not like a crazy ingredient when you think about it. I mean, you see it in a lot of Asian food, Asian American food and things like that, stir fries from Chinese restaurants and whatnot. But getting it fresh with the husk on, it's so tender and the husk is very tender and the silk is very tender and you're able to really eat kind of the whole thing.
Any specific condiments or sauce that, that are interesting and intriguing, to you?
Right now, I'm insanely intrigued by Big Boy sauce.
What is that?
Well, so the way that I address everything or attack everything food-wise by going into depth in doing research and figuring, when I create dishes with the new restaurant, we're going to have a burger on the menu, and I'm bound and determined to have this burger be the best burger in the city. And so we've really gone on this kind of R&D rabbit hole with burgers, with hamburgers lately. And one of the best kind of fast food, thin patty double burgers I've had in this whole thing is at Big Boy, which is a storied American kind of fast food chain that is nearly out of, there aren't very many left. I think less than 1,000 across the country at this point, but there's only 2 in Northeast Ohio. And I go into these things doing as much research about burgers as I would about, foie gras, where I could tell you almost verbatim the history of the Big Boy burger. But there is a sauce that you can only get at the local Ohio Big Boys. And it is just this tangy mayonnaise relish kind of tartar sauce that has special ingredients that I cannot pinpoint. I mean, I'm pretty obsessed with it lately. Like I said, I've had nothing but burgers on the mind for like the last few weeks. So that's where I'm at right now. So.
Oh, cool. Okay. That's something that, I need to explore as well. I don't think I have eaten at one of those Big Boy locations. So I have to try that.
Yeah. Yes, you must try Big Boy. It's so far, it's the best fast food burger I've had in years. So.
Yeah. What a big contrast with the bad and bougie chips and dip.
It would be very contrasting.
So for a home cook like I am, so what would be your suggestion if you take this idea of apple? What suggestion would you give me to come up with interesting and creative dish or, that I can give an unfamiliar twist, something based on apple?
I think that people, when they think of apples, they think of pie and desserts and things like that. They don't think of savory dishes all that often. So I think that I would suggest that you use it in something that maybe you would normally use potato in, or add it to something like chili. Could give a very wonderful sweetness as well as a nice like texture to something like chili, or add apples to your mashed potatoes. I think that's something that people don't do enough of. Just throw for every like 3 or 4 potatoes that you make for mashed potatoes, just throw it cut an apple up and throw it in there. And you just add this really nice sweetness to it.
Okay, so we are at the end of our discussion here, Chef, but I have a series of 5 rapid fire questions for you. Where do you eat or have a drink in Cleveland when you are off the clock?
Well, we tend to go to B&G Tavern, which is across the street from the Plum, a lot to have drinks after work. Food-wise, the Black Pig, Banter, Ushabu, Larder, a curated delicatessen. My friend Jeremy Umansky and Kenny Scott are just killing it over there with their version of a traditional deli. Yeah, drinks, Spotted Owl, of course, beautiful cocktails, Porco Tiki Lounge for tiki drinks. I mean, everybody loves a good fruity tiki drink, right?
Absolutely. So give me 3 dishes that you would not live without cooking or eating.
I was just thinking about this the other day. Queso fundido is one of my all-time favorites. I think that I would just have to have that for the rest of my life. So, melted cheese and flour tortillas and chorizo. Dry-cured hams are number 1 for me. I don't think I could ever live without eating prosciutto again, or a nice country ham. That's one of my favorite ingredients. Roast pork. My mom's roast pork is, and essentially is also my grandma's roast pork. We get it at holidays, and that's like the reason I look forward to Christmas is the roast pork. So you said you had a lot of cookbooks. So can you name 2 of your favorite? My all-time favorite cookbook is The Joy of Cooking. I think that it is just an essential book to have. It's so informative. There's plenty of background on all the ingredients and the recipes. It's in its, I think it's in its like 75th or plus edition. So, there's a reason they keep reprinting it and people keep buying it. And then currently, I'll say that I couldn't say what my favorite is right now, but I can say that the last one I read, the last last cookbook I've read fully, I have a couple that I'm just still waiting to tap, but State Bird Provision was a very good, very solid book. I really enjoyed a lot of the recipes and a lot of the background in that. I really enjoy cookbooks that have more than just recipes. I like to hear the story of the chef or the restaurant that they're based around. I like to hear the stories of, as anybody around certain ingredients or certain recipes in the book. So State Bird was really good. It was a gift from one of the cooks at the Plum, and I loved it. So are you breakfast for dinner or dinner for breakfast? Oh man, depends on the day, but I'm probably more dinner for breakfast. Wow. So what do you do then? Mostly I don't eat anything, but when I do, it's usually later. So it's usually more of like a brunch type. Yeah, brunch time. So I love a lot of Mexican food for breakfast. I like to go get tacos. Although I do love, my wife makes the best egg sandwich in the world. So sometimes I get a nice surprise. I wake up and one of those is waiting for me. That's always my favorite breakfast. But most of the time I end up just eating an apple or a banana and drinking some coffee in the morning. So you said that, one of your, pleasure is to taste like different fast food items. So what's your favorite one? What's your favorite fast food, product? So the chili cheese burrito at Taco Bell, hands down, without a doubt, is the above all. Really? Yes. I would not have expected that. I'm not even quiet about it. I'm a very big advocate for Taco Bell. I actually just did an interview with a nice gentleman, Ryan Joseph, for a Thrill List article that he released about the chili cheese burrito. He wrote a whole article about this wonderful fast food item because it's a very Ohio thing, apparently. I didn't know this, but it's like a regional thing. Northeast Ohio, some of Michigan, and Wisconsin is where you can get the chili cheese burrito, but you can't get one anywhere in New York or California or most of the South or Southwest. I love chili cheese burritos, and that's my dirty secret. Okay, Chef. So thank you very much for your time and being a guest, on Flavors Unknown. I guess next time in the area, I have one to try the chili, burrito, and I have to try the big boy, burger. We'll spend a day. I'll show you. Show you all the good stuff, Manuel.
And I have to come back to Plum Cafe and Kitchen for this wonderful bad and bougie chips and dip that I have to try.
Yes, please do. Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you for listening today. No worries if you were not able to write down some information that our guest was talking about, because you can find all of those in the episode show note on flavorsunknown.com. And if you are enjoying the show, please leave a review or a rating, as it helps other people to find it as well. If you have friends that are foodies, please send this podcast their way, as I am always happy to have more people listening. I see you in 2 weeks, and until then, remember that people who love to eat are always the best people.
You've just enjoyed another delicious episode of Flavors Unknown. Hungry for more? Hit subscribe. Tell us where you're listening from by leaving a review. And for social media and show notes, head to flavorsunknown.com.